Well, good evening, and thank you for attending this meeting tonight. I'd like to call the meeting to order at 6:31 p.m. We'll go to the adoption of the agenda. We have the addition of one written delegation and one virtual delegation for the public meeting, which have been added through the addendum package. Move. Oh. Okay, sorry. Moved by Councillor Danch, seconded by Councillor Bagu, that the special council agenda dated February 4th, 2025 be confirmed as amended. All those in favor? That'll be carried. Disclosures of interest. Any disclosures? Seeing none. Item 4.1, statutory public meeting report for proposed Miller's Crossing subdivision 2025-24. I'd like to officially open the statutory public meeting for the proposed Miller's Crossing subdivision. We are going to move the report onto the floor and then turn to staff. Moved by Councillor Aquilina, seconded by Councillor Bodner. All those in favor? No, oh, sorry, it just moved and seconded. My bad. That's one mistake. Keep track. I'll now turn the meeting over to planning staff. David Schultz, our manager of planning, will take the floor.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Elliott, and good evening, council, members of the public, staff. The purpose of this meeting is pursuant to sections 22 and 34 of the Planning Act, and to consider official plan, zoning bylaw, and draft plan of subdivision applications submitted by the applicant, the Biglieri Group, on behalf of the owners 1000427593 Ontario Inc., 12 Wide Realty Corp., and Stephen Fisher for the lands legally known as part of Lot 29, Concession 2, in the geographic township of Humberstone, City of Port Colborne, and Regional Municipality of Niagara. Notice of the public meeting was administered in accordance with sections 22, 34, and 51 of the Planning Act as amended, and Ontario Regulations 543/06, 544/06, and 545/06. Notice of the public meeting was circulated on January 15th, 2025 to internal departments and agencies. Notice was also circulated via regular mail to property owners within 120 meters. Meeting details have been provided along with the council agenda on the city's website and under the current applications page. As of the date of this meeting, staff has received the following agency comments from the following departments and agencies. From the City of Port Colborne Fire Department, they offer no objection to the application. Fire safety will be dealt with at the site plan or design stage. The drainage superintendent offers no objection to the application. Bylaw enforcement, no objection to the application. Canadian Niagara Power, no objection to the proposed application. However, they request to be that the developer follow up with CNP for hydro design details. And from the Niagara region, regional growth management and planning staff are satisfied that the proposed applications are consistent with the PPS and conform to the regional policies, subject to meeting all conditions as detailed in the region's response letter. At this time, there is limited sanitary capacity available. A draft plan condition has been included to ensure capacity is available prior to the registration of the subdivision. Comments from the city's development engineering staff are forthcoming. The procedure to be followed this evening will be to present Planning Division Report 2025-24, pass the meeting to the applicant to provide a presentation, hear any comments or questions of clarification from council to the applicant or planning staff, open the meeting to the public for comments, and announce the requirements under the Planning Act for written notice of passage of the applications. And commercial spaces, parks, and infrastructure. Again, the full zoning bylaw amendment can be found attached to the planning report. Next slide, please. The proposed draft plan of subdivision will divide the subject lands into 26 lots for semi-detached dwellings, 37 street townhouse units, 2 stacked townhouse blocks ranging from 43 to 115 units, 200 mixed-use apartment units for a total unit count of range of 306 to 378 dwelling units. I think the next slide is a concept plan, so we can bring that up if we need to. But at this time, is there any questions of clarification to planning staff.
Thank you, Acting Deputy Mayor.
What's that?
Thank you, Acting Deputy Mayor.
I was waiting for you.
Yeah, through you to our planner. Dave, I know there was an informal meeting happened, and I know you probably are aware of some of the concerns that happened there. I noticed in your preamble, you talked about it had been circulated through fire and emergency services. And would that be, obviously, the plan that's submitted with 3 entrances and egress?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, that would be correct, yes.
Okay. So certainly was a lot of talk with the developer at his open house about eliminating the Elmvale one. So that'll go in for the comments tonight and then back to those folks to see if that's a possibility.
Through you, Deputy Mayor, if that is feedback we received tonight, we can take that back to our fire department and seek clarification if that's an acceptable removal. And then the applicant would have an opportunity to revise their plans accordingly before it comes back to council.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions? No? David?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, at this time, I'd like to invite the applicant up to provide a brief presentation.
Just push the red button and then you're good to go. Perfect.
Excellent. Take it, David, that staff might be able to control the slide deck for me? Okay, perfect. Good evening, everybody. My name is Evan Sugden. I'm an associate and professional land use planner with the Bigley Area Group. We are the land use planning consultants for the owners and applicants of what we are calling Miller's Crossing. Thank you for having me tonight. This is a statutory public meeting, so we are here still to receive comments, take those comments back, in addition to other comments that have already been received, and then we'll take everything back, discuss, and if there's changes to be made, we have an opportunity to do that. The next slide, please. So this is a very brief agenda. I'm going to try to not cover everything David has already covered, and get into a little bit more detail where I think it might be helpful for an understanding. So we'll talk about the subject lands and surroundings, the proposal, the existing planning framework, the required approvals, which are the applications, the supporting materials that have been submitted in support and for the clearances of this application, the current status, and then the next steps to get to a staff recommendation and council decision, and then we'll open it up for any questions. Next slide, please. I think it went the wrong direction. There we go, thank you. So this is the subject site here, and as David pointed out, we have essentially frontage along 4 open roads. 2 of them, importantly, Steel Street and Elm, are existing major roads. So traditionally in the planning framework, these are roads where higher density developments are directed in municipalities because they can accommodate traffic a little bit better. And then we have frontage onto Elmvale Crescent, and then as well we have a small amount of frontage onto Barrack Road. And so together these subject lands form quite a large underutilized and vacant parcel in the urban area. And the urban area is a spot in the city where intensification is directed. Next slide, please. So what we've done here is just highlight a bit of the context. The white dashed line, which has a 400-meter radius, is generally what's considered to be a 5-minute walk for the average person. This is an accepted standard, so what we've done with this is to show where we have access. So you can see we've got the Niagara Region Transit Route 25, which borders Barrack and Elm. And then we have within a 10-minute walk to Trails Shopping Center, and in general just the neighborhood in terms of active transportation, which is sidewalk connections and other trails. In addition, we've got within a 5-minute walk and within a 10-minute walk a few existing public parks. Next slide, please. So this is the actual draft plan of subdivision that's proposed. Fundamentally, this is the proposal at hand, which is the creation essentially of new public roads, 3 of them, new lots for single detached homes, new blocks for semi-detached homes and for street townhouses, and then 2 blocks for a new public park, 2 blocks for a new future plan of condominium for medium density uses, and then 1 mixed use high density block along Elm Street. So that corner piece there you see along Elm Street, along that existing major street is where that high density component is planned. And we do have 3 public road connections. So 1 would be to Steele on the west, 1 is to Elmvale Crescent to the south, and then the other one, Street A, connects to Elm Street on the east and is planned as a emergency access. So that's a 4th sort of tertiary piece for emergency services. Next slide, please. So these are some of the proposed key statistics, because I know there was questions that came up about exactly what's being proposed. So a total of 306 to 378 units, as David already mentioned. 63 of those units are low-density, low-rise units. So that includes 20 single-detached homes, 6 semi-detached homes, and 37 new street townhouses. We also have, as I mentioned, several medium-density blocks. So that will result in 43 to 115. The reason for that range is to accommodate that future development plan for the market condition when a future plan of condominium gets submitted. And so the reason for that range is because today 43 might be appropriate, 5 years from now 115 might be appropriate, so we've accommodated that flexibility. And then in that mixed-use, high-density block, there's room for up to 200 units. This is not a guarantee that their 200-unit building will be developed there. This is just permission for up to that amount. Overall, we have a gross density of 61.6 to 76.1 units per hectare. So what that means is this is the number of units on the entire subject lands, and the net density is that 83.6 to 103.3, which is essentially the residential units on the residential land. And then I've broken up the densities there based on the type of density in the official plan, low, medium, and high. And it's that high density residential and that medium density residential range that requires the official plan amendment. And that's for the added flexibility. Next slide, please. So one of the questions we got back was how many people is this development likely to produce? And so we used the City of Port Colborne's new development charges background study to come up with a metric for what's called people per unit. And using the math from that, we've come up with a sort of a theoretical maximum. So this development with a full build-out could, in theory, bring between 629 to 789 new people to the city. That's 127 to 159 people per hectare. This development also has a degree of non-residential components. So this means that there's jobs. So some of the ways that that's accomplished in this proposal is grade-related commercial units in the mixed-use high-density block, which will bring new jobs. And that's more of your typical retail commercial space. And then we've got the block along Elm, which is a flexible type of product that can go there, but that can be live-work units, dedicated live-work units. And then we also have, from the development charges background study, a sort of Port Colborne's percentage of people who work from home, and that's about 10%. So we've carried that metric over here. And from just the live work at home, we have between 31 and 38 jobs. We can't be more specific than that at this point because we don't know exactly how many commercial units will be in the base of a future building and how many people will have live work units in a future townhouse. So at a minimum, 31 to 38 jobs at full build-out. So the height permissions are between 1 and 4 stories, which is in keeping with the low-rise to mid-rise, low mid-rise metric in Ontario and in Port Colborne, and then 1 block up to 10 stories. There's no guarantee that 10 stories will be constructed here. This is just a permission to allow for flexibility in building design. And then you're probably wondering, okay, this is a lot of people, but this is going to be developed in 4 phases. So this is a 4-phase approach, starting with what most people are probably used to in the neighborhood, which is the low-rise, low-density stuff. And then interestingly on this one, we've proposed sort of a new concept from a parkland and stormwater management standpoint. So this is a proposal for what's called a stratified park, meaning there's a stormwater management facility created using this geometric structural sort of like plastic building blocks, if you will, underground. And the park is built on top, and it actually has a cheaper and longer lasting service requirement than a standard municipal stormwater management pond. Next slide, please. So this is the proposed concept that David had brought up. Now keep in mind, this is a theoretical build-out just to demonstrate how the subdivision could be implemented in the fullness of time. So you'll notice on the Barrack Road, we've got long existing single detached lots, which creates the biggest separation between our land and our proposal. We've got the two existing major streets along Steele and along Elm, and then we've got the sort of more fine-grained, low-rise residential to the south. So where we've got the interface with the low-rise to the south, where the shortest lots are, we've proposed existing or new single detached homes. That's all the light blue stuff on the bottom. Where we've got the slightly bigger separation due to the long lots, we've got a mixture of single detached homes, semi-detached dwellings, and street townhouses. So a bit of that's the first little incremental increase in terms of density typology. However, the height permissions are still only up to 4 stories, or up to 3 stories, and then the height gets a little bit taller as you go towards Elm Street. So in the center there in purple, we've got some triplex townhouses, but we've also given permissions for other products like stacked townhouses. So by putting those in the center, we're creating a bit of a transitional element in terms of building height. And then in the top right, in the sort of pink color, that's our live-work units. So those can be a variety of product types, from rear lane housing, street townhomes, duplex townhomes. There's a variety of different ways that can be built out. This is just to show you how it can be done. And again, that permission is up to 4 stories, so a little bit more height oriented along Elm, where there's no existing interface with residential. The tallest component and probably the biggest change, transformational change to the neighborhood, is going to be this yellow building, which is a block intended for heights up to 10 stories. Now that height will be ultimately determined by an architect in terms of building location, height transitions, things like angular planes, anything that creates for a better site. So that's a plan for a future site plan and condominium application. Next slide, please. And I should point out, I should have just stuck to this slide, but you can see in the bottom center here, this is the new public park. That's one. The other is a parkette in the top closest to Steele. The parkette is a typical small green space where you could have, say, a small play structure or park benches, seating area. But the actual park that's beside our Elmvale Crescent access is a new public park, and that's the stratified stormwater management pond and park. Next slide, please. And this is the phasing of development. So phase 1 is planned to be all of the low-rise, low-density stuff along the edges to create that interface and that transitional element between the existing low-rise and what's to come later. Phase 2 is the stuff along Elm Street, which is those live-work units, to start bringing in some of that commercial element along that major street. Phase 3 is the medium-density block in the middle, where we've got an opportunity for heights up to 4 stories for a variety of townhouse types. And then phase 4, of course, is the highest density use, which would be built out last. And you'll notice that all of the streets and the parks would be operational as part of phase 1. Next slide, please. So David's already skipped over this, but the lands are designated urban residential, and they permit all of the uses that we're proposing on site today. What's not permitted as of right is the densities, but densities don't account for lot sizes, lot configurations, and modern product types, and that's where we need a little bit of flexibility. Next slide, please. This is the zoning. David's already gone over it, so this is the existing, which is residential development, and then residential fourth density, and a tiny little bit of R1. Next slide, please. This is for you a visual of the actual official plan amendment schedule, what it would look like in the official plan. So we would be creating a site-specific exception for all of the subject lands, and then specifically for 2 of the blocks proposed within the subdivision for those density permissions, and that's what's shown in gray on the bottom one there. Next slide, please. So the amendment is to create block-specific exceptions to the maximum density requirements for medium-density residential uses for blocks 35, and a max density exceedances for the high-density residential uses in the urban residential land use designation for block 34. So as we mentioned before, density is a unique metric to cap a site. In my opinion, the better way to look at how we can place an appropriate built form for a site is by the built form itself, the design, where that building is placed on a site, transitional elements of the building that an architect can implement, and then that tells us how tall we can make a building. And so we don't know exactly what that looks like yet because this is a future site plan stage, but we need to create the permissions for that building. Next slide, please. This is what the zoning schedule would look like as a change. So you'll see the P represent the new parks, and then the X-axis simply denoting a site-specific exception to each of those existing residential zones. And then the MU is the mixed-use high-density block. Next slide, please. I won't go over this in any more detail, but essentially these are the zones that we're proposing to facilitate what I've just described as the proposal. Next slide, please. And lastly, the official plan and the zoning bylaw amendments are required in order to facilitate a future draft plan of subdivision. All of these applications have been submitted concurrently. So once the draft plan of subdivision is approved, we would need to go through a registration phase in order to bring those blocks online. And then further to that, any of those medium density and high density mixed use blocks you've seen require a separate future application through a site plan and plan of condominium, which is a different stage and not submitted today. Next slide, please. Okay, so in order to help rationalize whether or not this was appropriate land use for these lands, a variety of supporting studies and materials were submitted, including things that were required for clearance of this. So we have a planning rationale report, a phasing strategy, noise impact study, air quality and odor assessment, a functional servicing and design brief from a civil engineer, geotechnical investigations which look at soil capabilities, land use compatibility study, an archaeological assessment which for our lands has been cleared by the ministry, surveys which include surveyor's real property report and a topographical survey, traffic impact and parking study, and that looked at all of the output plus the high density mixed use block. And then we've also created urban and architectural control guidelines to make sure that the built form that gets developed here and built here is actually appropriate and good in terms of a form. Next slide, please. So included a few images of what the stratified park looks like. So this is actually the material. This is one particular product, StormCon, that's a brand name. Doesn't need to be StormCon, but this is what it actually looks like underneath the park. And essentially, they can accommodate anything. This is an example from Amazon's new facility along the 401 in Cambridge. This accommodates weight up to, I think, up to 50 transport trucks. So this is an asphalt surface, but you can put soil on it. However deep you put the soil is the type of vegetation it can accommodate. So if there's enough soil, you can put trees, shrubs, the typical use for any park. And actually, we've heard from StormCon that it's maybe a bit more expensive in the onset, but it's cheaper over the long term and has a guaranteed 50-year maintenance life before you need to get into fixes, which is, we've heard, almost double what the standard stormwater management bond requires. Next slide, please. So this is just a bit of what's happened to date and what's happening next. So on December 4th, the applications were filed with the city. January 15th, the city deemed the applications complete, which triggered the statutory timeframe under the Planning Act for the council to make a decision. January 16th, the applicant, on their own initiatives, led a public open house to hear initial comments, which we've received and are recording. And then today, of course, we're having the statutory public meeting under the Planning Act. And then the next step is we're awaiting comments from all departments, agencies, and utilities, which we'll take and consolidate into a matrix take all of those comments back and then discuss internally to see if any changes or refinements need to be made to the plans. Then we'll address all of those comments and, if necessary, do a resubmission back to the city. And then within that 120-day time frame, theoretically, we would have a recommendation before council. Next slide, please. And that's it for my presentation. Thank you for listening to the extra details. That was a little long, but we're open to questions.
Thank you. Questions from council? Councilor Bruno?
Thank you, Acting Mayor. Thank you for the presentation. A few things. In the optional open house that you did, there was a lot of interest surrounding Elm Street and this, what was called a one-way entrance off of Barrack Road. Tonight you mentioned the word emergency entrance. That night it appeared that that was a one-way in off of Barrack Road that residents in there could use. So which is it?
My understanding is the Barrack entrance is intended for emergency access. So, but if that's changed since the public open house, I mean, we can come back to you with that. My client's shaking their head, so that's always been an emergency access. The three full-turn accesses are Elmvale, Steel, and Elm.
So the density along Elm is going to be accessed from Elm?
That's right.
Okay. And so that road is supposed to be, I mean, I've seen some of that in St. Catharines where they're like gates, but emergency vehicles can either push it open or unlock it. So you're telling me that's what that is?
Yeah, so the fire department, paramedics would all have an opportunity to comment. If that's their preference, they can require a gate access specific to them, and that wouldn't be an issue to facilitate that.
Okay. Well, I kind of like the idea that there's not a open pond with weeds growing in it for stormwater management and you put it underground now. I don't know that technology has been around for 50 years. So this may be something that engineering would have to check into, but I think we've all prided ourselves on not kicking a problem down the road to the next taxpayer or the next council. So is there any kind of deposit or bond that you put up? So 50 years come by and that thing's caving in and it's not just, it's a structural issue and there's a lot of cost and the subdivision is turned over to the city and the taxpayer of the day is paying to repair that. So I don't know if there's any bonding situation there, or perhaps, David, you could check on that if it's okay with engineering. But I don't know if you know the answer to that.
Yeah, through the mayor, that is a really good question. So there's a few nuances to answer that. Number one, the type of product that's used. What I mentioned is a StormCon product. It's a brand name. And so I think once it's agreed upon that this is an acceptable solution, the applicants can reach out to providers of this technology and get sort of their assurances to what the technology can offer, because they'll have to provide a warranty to stand behind that. And so we can relay that information back then to see, you know, what is the expected sort of maintenance period like before we have to get into some complicated repairs. The second piece to that is there's securities that the developer will have to post as part of the subdivision process. And the last thing is through the subdivision agreement, which the city will enter into with the applicant, there will be an opportunity for the city to add conditions that both parties will vet, and if it works like in your favor for a bond or you know, an undertaking to ensure a certain degree of responsibility, that can all be vetted between the municipality and lawyers.
One other question. So back in whatever year that was, when Elmvale and Bartok and that subdivision was built, planning department or the developer in its infinite wisdom left an opening on Elmvale for future development. In case you couldn't acquire enough land to perhaps do 2 entrances and exits, there would be one. I look at your plan and where it goes and being familiar with the area, sure, a lot of those lots are long on Barrack, 600 feet, whatever. But there also is land on Steel Street that some of those folks own, backing on to what amounts to vacant land now, which I'm presuming might or might not be zoned residential because it's in the urban service area. And yet I don't see you leaving a opening there for the potential for that land to be developed versus being landlocked. So again, I don't know if you've contemplated that, why you didn't do it, or perhaps that now circles back to our planning department to give an answer. But if you have a response, I'd be interested.
Sure, yeah, through the deputy mayor. I mean, I don't have a fulsome answer for you, but, you know, part of it is that there were initial discussions with those landowners to acquire that land. Those negotiations fell through, and that's just a business dealing that hasn't worked out. And so we're required under the Planning Act to provide connectivity where we can provide it, and we've managed to provide it in 3 locations, which is quite a significant feat for this proposal. And yet we haven't accommodated a future subdivision, but they need to come together to create a plan that creates enough land to subdivide in order to create a new connectivity piece. So as a standalone lot, it's a presumptive of us to say they're going to be a subdivision because it's too small. They need to sort of link together, and they also have the option of connecting to Steel directly off of theirs, assuming they take down their home, which is one of the ways we're creating connectivity to Steel.
I'm not so sure I agree with that. I understand what you're saying. Maybe we'll have some residents ask that, but I'd like in the record to see if that's required, because I think at the day, nobody maybe anticipated when it was farmland there that when the vacant 66 feet was left in Elmvale to accommodate another. You now as owner, the then owner, didn't have a Steel Street entrance, but it would have had an Elm Street entrance and an Elmvale entrance. Now that somebody else is going to be left in that position, there's not the potential for two-way in and out. There is that one piece there. So fine, I'm glad you answered the question, but I think I'll be pursuing that with the planning department for my comments. Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
Councilor Bodnar?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Through you to the presenter. Councilor Bruno touched a little on that new idea for your stormwater management. We did receive a written delegation from Michael and Julie Scott, and they were concerned about the water runoff from your development. But can you confirm that all of that runoff will be captured in that stormwater system that you have?
Yeah, through the deputy mayor, that's a great question. We have a functional servicing report that was submitted by civil engineers. In their opinion, the stormwater management pond that's been proposed for this site, along with standard single detached dwellings and lotting that would accommodate some degree of lot level infiltration, can accommodate all stormwater management runoff. Their grading and drainage plan demonstrates how that would flow.
Just to follow up on that, through Deputy Mayor to David. David, that's a requirement, isn't it, of the development, that they don't allow water off any faster than it's coming off now? Can you just confirm that?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, yes, that's correct. Anytime we have a development proposal, not to say it was done this way in the past, but for new developments, they all have to meet what their pre-development rate is of outletting. Whatever it is pre-development has to meet their post-development. So whatever is built on the site has to drain at the same rate or less than what is currently on site. Correct.
Good. Councilor Bagu?
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Through you to the presenter, I do want to thank you for having a public consultation before coming to here. We try to get developers to do that quite a bit, and you're the only second one to do it. So hopefully we change the rules, and I know they're working on it. So I do thank you. Has anything changed from that public meeting till tonight?
Through the deputy mayor.
Or are you just gathering information?
Not yet. No changes have been proposed since. We're trying to gather that information. A lot has happened very quickly, so once we have the comments from tonight, including anybody from the public, and then any comments received from formal agency, department, or regional comments, those will all be compiled and addressed together. And then if there's a change, it'll be submitted through a resubmission.
Okay, thank you. Through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. So just for clarity, you are not seeking permission to build up to 10-story apartment building on this application. You mentioned it's coming back to the site plan application, but it's my understanding site plan applications don't come. That's a rezoning, I think. Maybe David can correct me on that.
Through you, Deputy Mayor, from my understanding, through this application, they're looking to establish the zoning permissions for that block, which would allow up to 10 stories. It would have to come back to the city to go through the site plan process, and as the applicant mentioned, what that building looks like when that time comes, it could be less than 10 stories, but it hypothetically could be built at the full 10 stories if it goes through.
Right, so I understand that. So we are seeking permission for the up to 10 stories. This application in future council, which I don't imagine is going to be built for probably 5 to 10 years from now, but I would hate to see future council have a problem with it, and they could never decline it because we've already passed it. This council's already passed it, and you go to OLT, they're automatically going to give you permission because we've already approved it. So I'm a little leery on that. And the other one, Mr. Deputy Mayor, through you, is the access to Anvil Crescent. I'm definitely not in favor of putting a road through there. I know a lot of people that live in there. I drive through there. I'm okay with a bicycle path or a path going through there for access to get up to the other park between Fielden and Elm, but I'm definitely not going for a roadway. And I know through a site plan operation or site plan, Mr. Deputy Mayor, through you to David, the fencing on the back of these properties, that all comes in the site plan operation and sidewalks. So we're not asking permission tonight, it comes later on.
Through the Deputy Mayor, you can certainly make your requests noted at this time, but those details we look at through the detailed design following a draft plan approval. So there are conditions that can be included in the draft plan approval that mention that the subdivision agreement include a condition for a board-on-board fence, for example. So those are conditions council can add to the draft plan approval, should you approve it. But yes, it does come later at the detailed design stage.
And to you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, one more question for David. The public parkland, the 0.17 hectares, is that the appropriate size, or is that smaller than normal?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, I admit I haven't done the calculation at this stage yet, but typically for subdivisions, we look for 5% of land for parkland purposes. If that 5% isn't being achieved, then there is the cash in lieu opportunity as well. But ultimately, that's the city's decision to make whether we want to take the land or the cash at the 5%.
I'm good, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Thank you.
All good? Any other questions, comments? Councilor Beauregard?
Through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, to the presenter. In your report and the presentation, you really hit on the term live-work units. Can you expand on that? Like, what exactly is a live-work unit? Yeah, I'm just curious.
Sure, through the Deputy Mayor. That is a good question because it's a little bit different in every municipality. But essentially what we're trying to do with the zoning bylaws give sort of hard permissions so that these townhouse units could, if they wish, essentially have street access for, if let's say they were a professional services firm. And it allows permissions for public to walk up into their townhome, and they normally would have, say, kind of a meeting area or a small boardroom on the lower floor, and it also allows them to put some degree of advertising on the front, which can be we'll call it mitigated through our urban design standards. So if you have specifics on what you would want a sign to look like if they had a live work unit, that can be controlled through that process. So small metal signs or versus big neon things, you can prevent all of that. Alternatively, they would also just allow for people to operate, say, virtual businesses from home.
So through you, how does it differ from our home occupation provisions, I suppose, then, in terms of, I'm assuming we have home occupations in our zoning bylaw? Yeah. So I guess, yeah, how is this any different, or is it just being very specific?
Through the Deputy Mayor, it's being a little bit more specific. It also allows for the standard home occupation type use, the work from home scenario. This is more about having a legitimate business address associated with their house. And so most of the time they're limited to professional service offices, something that can be accommodated from the living room. But this is not a proposal for those uses. This is just permissions for them should they wish to have something. So you see this on Father David Bauer Drive in Waterloo. They have, you can Google it. They look quite nice in some of their townhomes. They can accommodate things like massage, professional masseuse, or there's planning and engineering firms that sometimes set up. But quite frankly, they're not always utilized always like that. More of the time, it's a home office that gets set up there.
Okay, I guess because I'm thinking about this, how often does these sort of situations go from like turning into, let's say, an Airbnb on top of all those residential units, and then you got the commercial at the bottom, or does that ever happen? Like, do you have any experience in that?
Through the Deputy Mayor, I would have to be speculating to answer that question.
I'll go to my next topic. I think you may have already hit this with Councillor Bruno's, but does your client own any of the lands abutting the subject property that is before us?
To my knowledge, through the Deputy Mayor, to my knowledge, this is the extent of their lands.
All right, and then I was just going through the definitions of the zoning bylaw, going through the zoning bylaw and looking at the zoning bylaw amendment. There is a specific reference to the term terrace. I kind of understand what it is, but it's not really specifically defined in our zoning bylaw, and I don't see a definition in the zoning bylaw amendment. So I'm just wondering if that's something, I'm just going to bring it up as a potential to maybe be defined for technical reasons in the future, but just something I noticed, so I could be wrong.
Through the Deputy Mayor, that's something I can work out with Mr. Schultz. Absolutely. And I would add, too, the live-work units were included as part of the way we can capture the required employment uses within the official plan. So if that's something the municipality doesn't want in terms of that specific block, I think that's something we can certainly take back because it was intended to show conformity with the official plan. There's a requirement for a certain amount of sort of non-residential area.
And then my last question is, I guess comment is, I don't see that you're looking for any parking adjustments in the zoning bylaw amendment. Am I correct in that?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, so I think that's good, because a lot of times you see zoning bylaw amendments, almost every single one looks for parking. That's usually a constraint on developers, so I think council can appreciate that you're working within that constraint. So that's my last comment. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Bruno?
Thank you, Acting Mayor. Through you to the developer. One of the things that I usually ask, because folks out here might want to know if you're for a real development firm and not just a land speculator. And so have you built any developments that the residents who will board this could view in Niagara? So what's your track record in Niagara? Where have you built? Where can they get an idea of the type of builder you are?
Sure. Through the deputy mayor. So for clarity, myself, I'm a independent professional land use planner providing an opinion to help guide my clients who are developers. I can't speak for their track record. This is my first file with them. But they're available to speak if they would like to answer that. But if they hadn't, everybody has to start somewhere. And do you want to go ahead, Paul?
Good evening. My name is Paul Savoya. I'm the owner of Niagara Pines Developments, as well as part of this company here as well. In this area, I'll just give a quick breakdown of a development in this area. There's not many local builders that will take a whole site and build it out themselves. I've been part of dozens and dozens of subdivisions where the developer sells off many lots to smaller builders. I might do 10 to 20 homes a year, as well as that's the majority of the Niagara home builders are small builders. So what our plan would be to do something similar to that. I might keep 10 lots for myself, and we would sell off some lots to other builders, and that's how it would go. I have a beautiful website we just redesigned. If anybody wants to check that out, you can see the homes we've done. We've won awards for them. So that's the type of builders that we are, and it's not going to be just one builder building this whole site out. It's going to most likely be several builders that I would be calling it that I know, and each one would take some lots or a block of townhouses or semis. That's pretty traditional for this Niagara region, how that would work.
So is the developer here?
Right. Yeah.
Well, I thought you were 10 lots of the development.
I'm a part of the company that does the development as well.
Okay.
I'm one of the principals, owners of 10004,
Okay.
as well as Niagara Pines Developments.
Okay, so you'll be building some of the houses
Absolutely.
in there, okay.
Yeah.
And what is it, Niagara Pines? Did you say?
Niagara Pines Developments.
Thank you.
Let's pick up truck outside.
Yeah. Thank you.
Just
one
before you
last
run
question.
away, just give me one
Yeah,
sec.
sure.
Can you give us the web address for your,
NiagaraPines.com.
if anybody wants to take a look at it, just so they know where to go? Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just one last question through you to David. As a result of your comment, was mentioned sidewalks. So does the city standard now include that developers have to put a one-side sidewalk in? So do we have to ask that question for it to be put in, or is that baseline now standard procedure?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, our city standard is that all local roads would have one sidewalk on one side of the street at least. So that you wouldn't have to mention that. That's something that we would already have included.
Great, thank you. That's all I have.
Councilor Beauregard?
Sorry, through Deputy Mayor, I'm going to have to declare a conflict. I didn't realize Niagara Pines Developments was part of the number company and was involved in this. So now that I'm aware, I'm going to declare an indirect pecuniary interest, as they are also a client of my employer. So I'm going to leave.
Should we scrub all your comments and questions from the previous? Councilor Bagu.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. What a way to get out of something, eh? One question, I guess, for David. Back when Councilor Bruno was talking about the link to the other adjoining properties, I know all the owners of the other properties. My mother-in-law actually owned part of the property near there, but she sold it a long time ago. The family sold it, so I have no pituitary interest in it whatsoever. But for approving this subdivision, can council approve the subdivision leaving, say, one lot open, so many feet for a roadway for maybe future development into that area? Can we make a condition, say, for 10 or 20 years? If after that time, then it's not feasible, then you can build a house there.
Through you, Deputy Mayor, to be honest, I haven't come across that exact scenario, but Certainly, there is room to negotiate through the subdivision agreement process. If we need to involve the city's legal counsel, we can do so with respect to that. But certainly, our goal is to work with the applicant to, we take in the comments and try to present the best product and to city council as well. So that is something we can take back and work with the developer on.
Do you, Mr. Deputy? I know because from Barrack Road, there used to be a road allowance that went to that subdivision pretty well to the boundary. And people were building houses, and they wanted to build there. The city wouldn't let them because they said that it's a future road for building. And then, but there was a limit on how many years, and 10 years or 20 years afterwards, then the city allowed them to buy the property and to build on it. So just for thought, Mr. Thank you.
Councillor Bodnar?
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, through you to the presenter. In one of the written delegations that were presented to us, and you did confirm you weren't asking for any parking, but they were wondering, is the parking for the proposed apartment building, is that going to be underneath? Do you know yet, or is that to be determined when you actually come back and do some site plan on that?
Yeah, through the deputy mayor, that's a great question. There's no design yet for that building. So it's phase 4, and this kind of ties into one of the other questions from, I believe, Councillor Bruno, but because it's a phased subdivision, we'll need to go through this registration process for every single phase. So, phase 4, by the time that apartment building gets there, this is many, many years out. I think the fastest registration I've been a part of is about a year. So, if we can do it that fast for every phase, it's an absolute minimum of 4 years before we're even looking at that. And then we have to do a site plan and plan of condo submission. And at that time, the architect could, put it underground, depending on how the water table is and the building costs, or partially below ground and partially above ground in a podium, a bit of surface parking. There's a wide variety of ways. It would all be on that block. And it can be designed to, be screened as much as possible at that time. But it's hard to speculate now because there's no design in front of us. This is just for the density permissions.
You good? Go ahead.
So then we've been around the parking issue quite a bit. So parking, no more 4 years, but or even later. Will that determine possibly how big that apartment building should be? You have to meet a certain parking requirement of the day, whatever that may be.
Through you, Deputy Mayor, yes, that's definitely a constraining factor for developments in general. So I think the higher the parking rate is, the more constrained a site would be to be developed. So if it's kept at the 1.25 standard of the day now, that would be when it does come forward, that would still be in place at the time, unless the city comes in and amends the zoning bylaw on a global scale to reduce parking rates all over the city. So certainly that would be still something that would follow the property.
Thank you.
You good? Councillor Bruno?
One last one through you to David, our planner. David, whilst the planning consultant mentioned it's phase 4, there really is no requirement to do it in that order, is there? So if I wanted to, if I own that development and I do phase 1, I could do phase 4 next, or I could do phase 4 first?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, typically the phasing plan is a typical condition of a draft plan approval. So we do like to nail down kind of the phasing approach, because it does. Typically the infrastructure is installed in a way where you're building out a certain area and then you're continuing that infrastructure. This might be a different case because they're coming all the way through first. But typically, the phasing plan is something we try to nail down at the draft plan condition stage.
So if I could, they would have to come back if they wanted to skip over a phase or reorder the development?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, typically we would be looking at different subdivision agreements for different phases. That's an approach we've taken before. So in order to seek approval for a phase prior to another phase, it would come to council, and council would ultimately enter into the agreement for that.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions?
Okay. Through you, Deputy Mayor, before opening the meeting to the public, I'd like to read the following. If a person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the City of Port Colborne before a decision on the proposed official plan and or zoning bylaw amendment is passed by council, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision of the City of Port Colborne Council to the Ontario Land Tribunal. And if a person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the City of Port Colborne before a decision on the proposed official plan and or zoning bylaw amendment is passed by council, the person or public body may not be added as a party to the hearing of an appeal before the Ontario Land Tribunal unless, in the opinion of the tribunal, there is reasonable grounds to do so. To any interested members of the public, if you'd like to receive future notices regarding these applications, you can contact myself by email at david.schultz, that's SCHULZ at portcolborne.ca, or you can also give me a call at 905-228-8117. You can also contact the city clerk. And finally, there is a sign-in sheet at the back of the room for anyone in attendance here. There's a little table there. If you'd like to sign your name, we'll make sure you receive future notices when this comes back for council and for a decision as well. At this time, Your Worship, if there are any interested members of the public who wish to speak to the application, this is the perfect time.
Thank you, David. So now we'll move into delegations. There are 4 registered delegates tonight. 2 of them are in person, 1 was a written submission, and 1 is a virtual delegation. We'll hear from them first, and then we'll open the floor to anyone else who is present and would like to speak. Just a reminder to state your name and address at the podium, and you have 10 minutes to speak. So we'll start with delegations. Our first one is Stephen Bedford. Come and state your name and address.
Good evening.
Red button.
Got it. Thank you. My name is Stephen Bedford. I'm a registered professional planner in the province of Ontario. I'm with Landex Developments. And this evening,
Just one
I've been
sec.
involved in,
Address?
122 Glenwood Avenue, St. Catharines, Ontario.
Thank you.
This evening, I've been involved with this block of land a couple of years ago, and I'm representing, or I'm here on behalf of 1053 Steele Street. And I have to give credit to the developer that's here. The job that he's doing of trying to bring together a bunch of separate properties and put them into a development package that is feasible and functional is a difficult job to do from a development perspective. However, having said that, this reflects back on many years' experience in dealing with blocks just like this. And I find it interesting that the developer has taken advantage of an access to Elmville, but has not provided the same opportunity to the lands to the north that are on the east side of Steeles, and frankly on the west side of Elm. And in my background as a planner and a planning director for many years, I think it's the municipality's opportunity to lead here. It is not the developer's opportunity to lead. It is the planner's opportunity to lead. And it's your job as a council to do that. The only real issue I have a couple of issues that I'd like to present to you. I have been through the planning justification report prepared by that's been submitted and is online. And the issue of the access to the north and the taking advantage of the access to the south is really the issue that I want to raise with you. And in fact, I would ask that you insist that a 20-meter gap be left on the north side of their street entering into the lands on the east side of Steele. And I also think you should also consider a 20-meter break on the east side of the property so that there is access into the rear of the properties that front onto Barrack. Those properties on Steele and Barrack are isolated once this development goes in. And if you want those lands developed, you need to give them an access now. It's not the developer's choice, it's your choice. So in going through the report that the planners presented, which is an excellent report, very comprehensive. There are just, as I mentioned, a couple of points that I think need to be reflected on. So in Table 1 of their planning justification report, they talk about the Planning Act, Section 2, and how under item H, the orderly develop of safe and healthy communities. And they talk about integrating seamlessly with existing infrastructure, services, and transportation networks. And then they say enhances safely through well-planned streets and public spaces. Without a gap to the northern property on Steele or a gap on the Elm Street side, they're not enabling those blocks to be integrated into the development of this community. It will sterilize those blocks, make them very difficult to develop. Similarly, on item M, coordination of planning activities. That is the town's role. Coordination of planning activities, and as I've mentioned, proposal integrates local infrastructure and road networks. Those two gaps need to be created so that the future road network for those blocks that are presently isolated because of previous activities would be isolated forever. Public health, proper street connectivity. There is not proper street connectivity without those 20-meter blocks being left available. I'm not suggesting you stop the development at all, but what I am suggesting is you ask the developer to leave for the city a 20-meter block, just like happened on the development below many years ago. That was an initiative by the municipality to insist that 20-meter access be left. So similarly on section 5124 of the Planning Act, the criteria for development again, whether the plan conforms with the official plan and adjacent plans of subdivision. The planners are alleging that the proposal also aligns with adjacent subdivisions. Yes, they've got a connection on the east, and yes, they've got a connection to the west, but they do not provide any opportunity for a connection to the lands on the east side of Steeles Avenue to the north. It's not in conformity with the Planning Act. Similarly, under E, linking the highway in the proposed subdivision with the established highway system in the vicinity and the adequacy of them. Similarly, it doesn't connect. Without those two 20-meter gaps, those blocks behind those single-family homes on Barrack and on Steeles are isolated. Now, the Port Colborne official plan. Intensification and infill. And as a planner, I encourage intensification and infill. And as I mentioned, the job that they're doing now is a difficult job to do. But I think in this particular case, it's some relatively easy thinking could deal with the issues that we're talking about. So you talk about the design guidelines and policy 2.4.3.2, It says, where appropriate, the design of the development should provide linkages and connections to connecting and proposed pedestrian and bicycle networks. There are no connections north to the lands on the east side of the street, and there are no connections into the lands on the east of Elm Street. Now, drawing on my experience in the significant past when I dealt with blocks just like this in municipalities just like Port Colborne that are now fully developed 100,000 people municipalities. The point of policy 3.2.1E states that prior to the development or redevelopment of any large vacant area within the urban residential designation, a secondary plan should be prepared. Now, the developer has said, it's not big enough to do a secondary plan. That may be the case. But it doesn't mean that you can't scratch your head about what could happen in those blocks, those blocks between Steele and Elm and Barrack. As a planner, a municipal planner and planning director, I sat down and did some sketches about what could be a street pattern in those areas in the future. So the developer could say, oh, this is a potential. It isn't the answer, but it's an opportunity, and it illustrates how these landlocked pieces now potentially could develop. Now, in the past, I did it as a municipal planner. I didn't call it a secondary plan. I called it a tertiary plan, and it wasn't in ink. It was in pencil. But people knew that a local street network could find its way around through those rear lands that are now just vacant, so that in the future, a year, 5 years, 10 years, those lands can be developed because there is an access into both parcels. And so I would suggest that either the developer be asked, told, to do a sketch illustrating how that whole block will develop and how his plan, the plan, will integrate into that block, so that the other blocks that are presently just single-family homes with vacant land behind are difficult to develop for sure, and it's going to take somebody with some imagination to develop it. But without road access, they're not going to develop. So I'd encourage you not to just ask the developer. I'd ask you to insist that a 20-meter block be left so that you could access the lands north of the development along the east side of Steeles, and similarly on the west side of the property. So that's my concern. And frankly, without those blocks, this plan does not conform to your official plan and does not meet the requirements of the Planning Act. So that would be my submission on behalf of 1053 Steeles Avenue. And I'm happy to answer any questions. I want to see this happen properly. That's my concern.
Perfect, thank you. Are there any questions for the presenter? No? Thank you. Our next delegate is Ethan, and I don't want to mispronounce your last name, so I'll give it my best try. Erdoganoglu? Is that even close? Okay, I'll go with that. Just state your name and address, please.
My name is Ethem Erdoğanoğlu. My address 27 Ramfield Drive, Toronto, Ontario. I own 1053 Steeles Street. So last year I tried to sever my lot on the Steeles Street. So city was asking us the 20-meter road allowance. So we followed that. And then when we followed that, we were thinking that if there is another site developed, they will do the same thing. Otherwise, I would have applied to build another house on the Steeles Street. So I know that I'm going to lock the rest of the blocks. So we left the road allowance. Now I'm here to ask, they should do the same thing on the 2 blocks. And then another thing, they are saying the interior blocks are so small they built like 11 acres land, and then the rest of the balance of the land is more than 11 acres. Same side of the acreage left over inside. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions? David, any comment or nothing? Okay. Thank you. The third delegation was a written delegation from Michael and Julie Scott that was received and has been filed, correct? Yes. And our fourth delegation is a virtual delegation from Rocco Arielota. Oh, sorry.
I did make a written submission as well, so if he's touched upon, Council's touched upon a few of those aspects, so
You don't want to come up and speak?
I'll make it official.
You can?
I'll tell you my name, address, and everything, but.
Sure, yeah.
Hi, everybody. My name is Rocco Arielota. I live at 35 Elmville Crescent. I live on the east side of the Elmville Crescent easement. I wrote a written submission today in regards to some of my concerns. I'll make it brief because it was acknowledged earlier from a few of these counselors and stuff. Basically, I feel like our home is going to be mostly affected from this change of the development, per se. We're going to have a road put in next to our home, a sidewalk, a park put in our backyard, and what are they, stacked townhouses in behind the park, which would be in our aerial view of our home, right? We have a two-story home. So basically, Councillor Bruno and Councillor Bagg, you touched upon it. I requested a few things about the roadway, possibly, you know, since we have 3 roadways, this would be a 4th, possibly to be looked at. Some privacy concerns as far as fencing and trees planted and area of where things are going to be located, maybe a little bit further back. It's been touched upon tonight, so I appreciate that. I know our area is a quiet area. That roadway per se would basically, I don't think it would even be used. We have 3 arterial roads there. We have Elm Street, Steele Street, and Barrack. So it would just cause more congestion. And as far as the population numbers that were presented here, I would say, yeah, that would be a baseline number. At our last meeting with the developers, we had a planner come in late with her grandmother that lives on Donnelly Street. After the developers spoke in regards to that's the number of people that can live in that area. She spoke to the fact that eventually you can make housing is slim. You can make basement apartments and things can be changed later on. So we're looking at a number of 800 to 1,000, which could potentially be 1,500 to 1,700 one day in that small area of land. And I don't know if it's not a big area there. It's not that big. So you're looking at potentially 1,500 people on the high end. And that's a lot of people to be put in that area. You know, we have infrastructure studies being done in the area. We have, residential homes surrounding the perimeter of the area, which will be impacted upon this. So there's a lot at stake here. I'm not against development, but I like to think things through and, put things into perspective, what people want or what's around the area and what makes sense kind of thing, right? So, I mean, I get it. Everybody wants to go big, but if you allow these big or permissions of 10-story buildings or 4-story stacked townhousing now, it can happen later. Who's to say, right? So if we could do things, we could do it right. Everybody could be happy. You could build your 10 homes. Oh, he's not here no more. He's gone. The developer, everybody can have, be happy to a sense. And I know the people in my surrounding area agree with me upon, keeping our area somewhat the way it is. And these are some ways of doing it. So I appreciate your time, everything that you put into it, and let's try to work together to make things work. Appreciate it.
Perfect. Thank you. What are we doing now? Is there anybody else that wanted to say anything? You don't have to have your name put forward if you just want to come up and have your say. Now's the time to do it. Yep. And just name and address first, please.
And I live on 7 Elmvale Crescent. Truly, I think you've said everything that needs to be said that concerns me. Both of you have. Just want to emphasize the fact that you will change the essential nature of our neighborhood with that Elmvale Crescent access. In addition, and as our friend the planner has said, without access to the north, you do sterilize that whole area, that whole block. So I agree, I'm not against development. I just don't want my neighborhood turned into a runway. I know that sounds selfish, but it's why we're there, because it's quiet. So thank you for bringing those things forward.
Very good. Thank you. Is there anybody else that would like to speak? No? We're good? David? Is he close?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'll just remind everyone that if you wish to be notified of the approval of the official plan and/or zoning bylaw amendment, you must make a written request to the clerk. Only those persons in public bodies that give the clerk a written request for the notice of adoption and passing of a zoning bylaw amendment will be given notice. If you've provided written comments already, I believe we have your contact information, but maybe just to be safe, just sign the sheet or send an email to myself, david.schultz, schulz @portcolborne.ca, just to make sure we'll get you that notice. The proposed official plan amendment, zoning bylaw amendment, and draft plan subdivision recommendation report will return to council at a future meeting. This concludes my portion of the public meeting. I will now turn the meeting back to you, Deputy Mayor Elliott, to close the public portion of the meeting and receive the report for information.
Thank you, David. Councillor Bodnar.
Mr. Deputy Mayor, thank you. Through you to David. David, Councillor Begg, you brought up the fact that we might want to put in that fencing is to be provided. Is tonight the night to do that, or is it at the next go-around?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, that's certainly something we can take back. And when the report does come back, it will typically have the draft plan conditions attached to that staff are suggesting council adopt, and we can make sure that that's in there. Do you have an idea of which areas you'd like to look at?
Seeing as how it's not my suggestion, I'll leave it to Councillor Baggy, but I think it's a very good idea.
Councillor Bagu?
To you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, I know Mr. Schultz is familiar with the area, so I trust his judgment, and we can always change it.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you. We're all good. So that being said, Development and Government Relations Department Planning Division Report 2025-24 be received for information. All those in favor? And that's carried. So thank you for all coming out tonight. The public meeting for the proposed Miller's Crossing subdivision is officially closed. If you have any comments, please forward them to our lovely city clerk at cityclerk@portcolborne.ca. And we are now going to return to our regular agenda. Don't forget, if you want to be contacted, to sign in on the sheet at the table in the middle aisle on your way out, and we'll send you all the information as we go along. We'll just take a couple of minute recess till everyone that's leaving can We're good to go? Okay, moving on. Item 5.1, financial planning, servicing East Side Lands, report 2025-28. We have report 2025-28. They're going to move it onto the floor and then turn to staff. Moved by Councillor Beauregard. You don't have a conflict, do you? You sure? You will see. Seconded by Councillor Bodnar. And right now we'll turn it over to staff.
You can't close our door, but you could close them in the back.
Yeah, just pull the one side. We're good now? So it's been moved, so we'll pass it on to staff. Mr. CAO.
Thank you, Council. So tonight, what we've invited two of our, I guess, consultants that will be helping us with respect to a project. With respect to servicing the East Service lands. We've talked about this many times at Council. There is a total, and you'll see in the report, of $98 million with respect to capital projects moving forward to be able to service the East Service lands. Doane Grant Thornton and Borden Ladder Jarvis are helping us put together a plan to develop a financing and a business plan with respect to this. I'm not going to go through the whole presentation. I'm going to turn it over to them, if that's all right with Council, and invite them up to the podium and present. Thank you.
Maybe we'll just go to the next slide. There we go. So Adam and I are with Doane Grant Thornton, and we're a professional services firm specializing in financial advisory services for municipalities and utilities. And Mark Rogers here is from BLG, a law firm that also specializes in that space. Next slide, please. So for Doane Grant Thornton, we'll be focusing on managing the project for all the stakeholders and providing advice and recommendations, reviewing the financial model that is designed to test the cash flows of the projects and the financing. We'll be supporting and facilitating discussions with the prospective lenders, and we'll be advising on GBE accounting related matters. And that relates to, as Mark will describe here shortly, a municipal services corporation. And by using government business enterprise, that allows it to be achieved with financing that's on its own. So the financing is separate from the city and accounted for separately. And BLG will be providing advice from a legal and strategic perspective on the Municipal Service Corporation. Next slide. The next slide. Just in terms of the project, I know there's a lot of familiarity with it around the room, but we did want to emphasize that this relates to 1,000 acres of industrial and commercial property from the Second Concession Road. It's specifically related to the Kasai plant, which is obviously a very significant development in the region, which is approximately 195 acres. And the service land could accommodate approximately 3,000 homes in addition to that. As the acting CAO noted, the costs for the city infrastructure, including the West Welland Canal, are estimated at approximately $98 million. And we'll get into that in a little bit more detail in a moment. But this will have a very significant impact in terms of economic benefits and other benefits. So it will bring 5 kilometers of new pipe to the Port Colborne network. The project will drive 12% increase in property tax base, so driving more revenue to the city. There are expected to be 300 new jobs from this project, and it's estimated that that would be completed in 2027. My colleague Adam will speak to the next couple slides.
So when it comes to the funding, as Brian mentioned initially, 98 million is the total amount. Really, most of the funding is going to come from development charges in the future, but the problem here is timing. So the infrastructure is required before those development charges can be collected. So the answer to that problem is debt financing. And so you could see we've listed all the different elements of the project and the funding sources, either through grant applications, user fees, development charges, and the like. But for all or partial debt requirement is required for each phase of the funding of all the projects. So our job is to help the city obtain that debt financing on the most advantageous terms possible. Next slide, please. So funding for this project is currently being worked on in conjunction with city staff. To date, the city has embarked on numerous water and wastewater projects. Currently, about $18 million of debt has not yet been issued, but future projects to replace current infrastructure and meet future service needs are anticipated to require debt as well. The city does have capacity to issue this debt, though, and so the annual repayment limits, or ARL, the city must abide by is 15%. The city has imposed that maximum on itself. Across the province, municipalities are capped at 25% of that annual repayment limit. Currently, the city's ARL is pretty good, around 4%. But of course, with the amount of debt we're talking about here, that is projected to increase. And the city, at this stage, does not have the reserves or cash to cash flow these projects on its own, which is the reason why we need the debt financing. Next slide, please. Now I'll turn over to Mark.
Good evening, Deputy Mayor, members of council. So I wanted to give a quick overview on municipal service corporations. What are they and why would you use one? So the Municipal Act allows municipalities to create corporations for certain municipal purposes. So I think of these as a tool in the municipal toolbox. So why are they needed? Well, as you'll be aware, Ontario, across the province, experiencing very significant growth, very, very significant growth. Lots of infrastructure projects, but municipalities have through legislation, a limit of what they can actually finance. So you can set up these corporations, and many municipalities are doing it as a way to finance these and yet not cut into your borrowing capacity for other municipal projects. So what we do is we set up these corporations under the Municipal Act, and we set them up in entities that are known as government business enterprises. And that's important because once you qualify for that, this new corporation can borrow on their own. It goes on the corporation's balance sheet and not on the municipalities. So it's a way to free up your existing borrowing capacity for other projects and let this corporation carry on its own. Because it's a corporation, it would have an independent board of directors. There's a transparency, there's reports to council, so it's set up like really any other corporation in terms of it has obligations and duties to fulfill the objectives that council sets. Importantly, we would also set up a shareholders agreement. City of Port Colborne would be the 100% shareholder. You would own this company, and you would spell out your expectations, the scope of the business in that agreement, because that's a very important document. Also, under the legislation, there may be certain decisions that you don't want the corporation board of directors to make, that you want to make it as council, and we can carve those out under the legislation so certain decisions come back to you. An example could be the dividend policy, for example, or the debt equity ratio of the business. Most importantly, although this new corporation would run this water, wastewater activity for the new industrial lands, it would be council that would set the rates. So the company would come to you, whatever it is, every year, every 2 years, with a case to say, this is the kind of revenue we need, here's the resultant rates, but ultimately, council always retains that discretion. Finally, you own the corporation, so you will always own the water wastewater system. This is not an issue of privatization. This is simply a corporate form to deliver these municipal services, but at all times it remains publicly owned under the city of Port Colborne. Next slide, please. The legislation requires that we do certain things before these corporations are up and running. It has to be something that the municipality could do directly under law, which of course water, wastewater we can do. We have to prepare a business case that explains why we're doing this, what's the benefits to the community and the municipality. There is public consultation required. That's something we'll talk about, the shape and form, but we have to do that. If there's assets being transferred over, there's certain policies that council has to approve. And also there's various regulations that we have to comply with under the Safe Drinking Water Act and other. How we would actually affect this corporation is council would pass a resolution approving the incorporation. Then there's documents filed with the province known as Articles of Incorporation that sets out the framework within which this corporation operates. And as I say, we'd have a shareholders agreement as well. So there are a series of steps and legal steps that we have to take place to put this in place. Then there'd be corporate bylaws and other legal requirements to get this set up. And then finally, for my part, the next slide. To be qualified as a government business enterprise, it has to be a real company with real authority. It can't just kind of be a shell. So it would have a board of directors that would have fiduciary duties to act in the best interests of the corporation. These would be individuals with a certain skill sets and background to oversee this kind of company. As I say, you could bring things back to the council for decisions. That's something we would talk about. And because it's a corporation, if there were net revenues at the end of the year, under the legislation, it allows you to dividend those profits back to the municipality for other municipal purposes, and that would come up on a tax-free basis. And I will say that, we're talking about this corporation for water, wastewater, but we're seeing these corporations created by municipalities across the province for a variety of reasons. Not only water, wastewater, affordable housing, rural broadband, telecom. So it really is a very kind of important new tool to deal with the very real pressures you and other municipalities are facing across the province. So that's just kind of a high level. We'll be back before you again, but I hope that gives you a bit of a flavor of why we're doing it and how we get from here to there.
Thanks, Mark. Questions, comments? Councillor.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I just wanted to emphasize, maybe either it's for you guys or for our CAO, for those watching at home, that this is specific to an industrial geographic area of Port Colborne employment lands, not the existing city residential, commercial, industrial water and wastewater area. Is that correct? To any one of you?
Through the Deputy Mayor, that is correct. This is only for the industrial property with respect to where Sac Estate and the 1,000 acres that are in that vicinity.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Through you to the presenter. You touched on it briefly that other municipalities are doing this. And I think maybe you are actually working on some of these other ones, or your company is. And so I'm just thinking that the public that might be watching this has never heard of this before. And they wonder whether we're the guinea pig doing it the first time or something. But can you stress that these are set up and they're a real thing and they work very well?
Yes, I can share with you that I'm working with multiple municipalities on other water and wastewater municipal service corporations. But really in the past 5 years, I mean, many Ontario municipalities are in the exact same position as the city of Port Colborne. They've got various infrastructure needs and they don't have the debt capacity to finance it. So in addition to water, wastewater, we're also seeing these municipal service corporations for affordable housing, for workforce housing, for local telecom, for rural broadband expansion. So it gives you a sense that, you know, municipalities in a sense, because of the huge growth that Ontario is facing, to be creative to kind of meet these needs. So this is definitely happening in many jurisdictions across Ontario.
You good? Thank you. Councillor Bagu?
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I just want to reaffirm that this is not going to delay any of our infrastructure repairs on water, stormwater, and sewer and water lines. It's full steam ahead, and we're fixing the leaks, and this is not going to delay anything.
Through the deputy mayor to the councillor and council, this won't delay anything. The reason this presentation is in front of council and for the public to see today is the public's heard that there is a significant investment required to open up these lands and to service them. And there has been questions that the city's received with respect to how we're financing them. And we have these presenters here today working on the business plan to make sure that as we build our financing strategy, we can isolate it. And one way that they're presenting to us is we can isolate it in a municipal service corporation, a large component of the debt. That means that the city's debt capacity will be kept free to be able to do these other projects that you as council want to direct and get the shovels in the ground for water, wastewater specifically. So 100% that what's being presented here today is to free up and to make sure that the city maintains its capacity to do the capital works that's needed on a current infrastructure.
And with that, I'll turn the presentation back over, Deputy Mayor, to Gunther.
Okay, Adam, I think you might be the next slide. Yeah. Just 3 more slides.
So after the Municipal Services Corporation is set up, the structure that's being contemplated in order to secure the debt for this project is by entering a minimum purchase agreement with the primary user, Asai Kasai. And so this agreement is really used to not only pay for the water, but really help secure the debt. So financiers will want to see the agreement, they'll vet the agreement, they'll look at it and see that it's going to be a 20-year agreement, and we'll line that up with the term of the debt as well. At least that's the plan today. It's currently being negotiated, and we're involved in reviewing those agreements where applicable. When it comes to the discussions to date, although nothing is finalized, we expect the agreement to include a minimum purchase of water volume and also a minimum charge for wastewater. However, we build on actual consumption rather than the traditional 1-to-1 ratio between water and wastewater. There's also guarantees over future price increases over a 20-year period, which provides certainty to the primary user and helps, of course, secure the debt financing over that period. Turn back over to Troy.
Let's go to the next slide. And just from a timing perspective, this has obviously been moving quite quickly given the importance of the project and the support it has from multiple levels of government. We're right now working on multiple work streams as discussed to move this forward, and we'll be reporting back to council over the next couple of months on the progress. The plan is for the project to begin construction in April of 2025. It doesn't mean all the pieces have to be put in place, but they have to be sufficiently advanced that council can make a decision whether it's comfortable moving forward or not. And then through the remainder of the year, we would finish putting in the rest of the pieces so to make sure we can achieve the desired outcome in accounting treatment and financing. Next slide. And just in conclusion, so our next steps and the key considerations would be to finish pursuing the financing options, both the temporary during the construction phase and the long-term to match the 8K contract. Complete the 8K contract and get that in place. Make sure that this is set up to meet the GBE requirements for Municipal Services Corporation in terms of the accounting treatment, complete the required due diligence for both the city and for the lenders, and then return to council to seek direction to complete the necessary public consultation and confirm next steps in going forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, gentlemen. Any questions or comments? No? No? Thank you, gentlemen, for the presentation. And I'm sure that I could speak for council and say that we really look forward to working with you as we go forward with this file. So thank you for the presentation tonight.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Very much.
So with that, Corporate Services Department Report 2025-28 be received for information. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. We have a procedural motion tonight. And it's probably unique. I've never seen this before, and it's dealing with me. It's with respect to appointing a deputy mayor. I am deputy mayor right now and acting mayor while Mayor Steele is away. And it's currently my term, so while I appreciate the opportunity to sit in as acting mayor, I believe I'm unable to do it at this time due to conflict with work. I just don't have the time to deal with all the issues that a mayor, an acting mayor, should deal with. So I thought about it for a couple of days before I talked to the mayor about it. And I just thought that it wasn't fair for me to ask staff to change everything that they wanted to do with regard to timing and things like that. So I decided that I would step back from the position. It saddens me to do that. I was really looking forward to sitting in this chair more often. The view from here is really nice. But I knew that you would all hound me down for any mistake that I made, so I thought, you know what, I'm not going to take that. I'll step aside. But in reality, it just didn't fit, and I'm kind of heartbroken over that. So we do have to replace me with another acting mayor, and I'm not allowed to vote because of the position that I have right now. But I've thought this over for a long period of time, and I'll put this out that I really think that Councillor Bodner would be a really good substitute. I know he's the most senior person. He has been the mayor previously. So it came to me that he might be, to me, he was the obvious replacement. Not that I'm replaceable. So don't think that you can replace this guy. But I would need somebody to put forward his name. Should he accept? Sorry? Oh, sorry, I didn't. Councillor Aquilina?
I would be, honored to put forward Councillor Bodner's name for the nomination.
Seconded by Councillor Danch. So, moved by. Oh yeah. Okay. So that section, I have to read the fine print now. So moved by Councillor Aquilina, seconded by Councillor Danch. That's Section 5 of the procedural bylaw number 6979/17/22 be waived, and that Councillor Ron Bodner be appointed to the role of Deputy Mayor effective as of February 5th, 2025, ending on May 31st, 2025. All those in favor? Unfortunately, that's carried. Thanks, Ron. We know you'll do well, so I appreciate it. Go ahead.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I may have to come to you for some advice as we go along, so be prepared.
You got it. Going to have to reread the whole thing. We're now going to move back into closed session, and we will not be returning to the broadcasted live stream. Moved by Councillor Bagu, seconded by Councillor Bodner. The council do now proceed to meet in closed session under Section 239(2)B of the Municipal Act 2001, where a closed meeting is held if the subject matter being considered are personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees. Section 239(2)D of the Municipal Act, where a closed meeting is held if the subject matter being considered is a labor relations or employee negotiations. Section 239(2)E of the Municipal Act 2021, where a closed meeting is held if the subject matter being considered is litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality or local board. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you all for coming tonight, and that's it for us.